Welcome everyone to the 2020 Greater Vision Climate Smart Agriculture event, presented by CSU Monterey Bay's College of Business, College of Science, and the Grower Shipper Association Foundation. At this time, I would like to welcome to the virtual stage the MC for this afternoon, Dennis Donahue.
Good afternoon and welcome to Greater Vision 2020. This year's theme is Climate Smart Agriculture. And the Grower Shipper Association Foundation is pleased to partner once again with Cal State University Monterey Bay. And to get us started this afternoon, I'd like to welcome CSUMB President, Dr. Eduardo Ochoa. Doctor?
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. On behalf of CSU Monterey Bay and the Grower Shipper Association Foundation, GASF, I would like to welcome you to the 14th Greater Vision Forum. Greater Vision provides a series of public forums on agribusiness and agriculture, featuring speakers and panel discussions from community members, academic researchers, elected officials, public agencies, and agricultural representatives. The series addresses agricultural issues important to agriculture and the larger community and is designed for the general public, students, and industry practitioners. Let me start by thanking the organizers of the Greater Vision Forum who have done such a superb job of bringing us together to discuss a topic of tremendous importance and impact for the future of our region and humanity: climate smart agriculture. The partnership between the College of Business, the College of Science, and the GASF exemplifies the enduring model of university-industry partnerships that our university has made the hallmark of its outcomes-driven and applied educational mission. This mission and the model it uses provides a mutually beneficial, reinforcing, and regenerative socioeconomic system where the agriculture industry, represented by the GASF and its parent organization, the Grower Shipper Association, which consists of the leading agribusiness firms in the Salinas Valley, Pajaro Valley, and beyond, provide the practices and jobs that enable our academic programs in business, science, and other academic disciplines to provide the student talent and the research that enables the industry to be productive and grow. Today's topic emphasizes the key changes that are taking place in the business and science of agriculture. Perhaps the most important change is the growing recognition that the environment and agriculture are tightly bound together and that one cannot be addressed without the other. To meet the demand from a growing and more affluent population, global food production will need to rise 70% in less than 40 years. Production in developing countries will need to almost double. Some of this could be met by reducing post-harvest and post-marketing food losses. But the bottom line is that there will be more pressure on the land to produce. And the developed countries of the world, like the United States and places like our wonderful Salinas and Pajaro Valleys, will have to lead this change in new science, research, and management of our scarce and increasingly pressured resources. We need to maximize the use of natural processes and ecosystems, reducing and optimizing the use of key resources like water, energy, plant nutrients, and land, while preserving and even enhancing our natural environment and ecosystems. We must reduce excessive use of external inorganic inputs. And we must also enhance the diversity of production, using a mix of new technologies, growing methods, and natural processes. This is not a simple evolution or a simple approach. It requires thousands of different approaches, each one tailored to local communities, climatic intensive, not input intensive. And the ability to feed our growing world population depends on the success of the application of this knowledge to agricultural practices. To our industry partners and practitioners attending this event today, thank you for your partnership and support of our university's programs and research. And thank you to all of our students and faculty members attending this event, who will provide the talent and the brains to drive the operations, research, and success of agribusiness in our region and beyond. The Job Expo, in partnership with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, the GASF, and local agribusiness firms, will provide the venue for making this possible. I'm therefore very pleased that the Grower Shipper Association Foundation and our College of Business and College of Science at CSUMB have invited an outstanding group of climate science and agribusiness leaders and researchers to explore the opportunities and possibilities of climate-smart agriculture, as well as the current state of the science and business application in this critical area. I look forward to a productive and educational event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ochoa, and you're right. We really do have a who's who on the panels that'll follow our first person who is part of that who's who, Elizabeth Fastigi, who's with Amazon Web Services, and she heads up business development on a worldwide basis for Amazon. And I'm really excited to have Elizabeth join us for our keynote conversation before we get to those panels. So with that, Elizabeth, welcome to Greater Vision. Anyway, good to see you, and thanks for joining us. You know, we were thrilled when you agreed to speak. You know, obviously, as you know, Amazon's certainly got a marquee name, but as we got into your background, I don't think we could have found a better person to talk about today's topic. But before, and I'm particularly intrigued by your educational background, and I want to start off with that. But before we go there, first of all, can you just explain to everyone what your current role and responsibilities with Amazon are, and then we'll use that as a backdrop, and then we'll have a conversation.
Sure, happy to do it. And thank you so much for the invitation. I think this is a wonderful event. I know that you put on really great programming. And when I learned sort of the audience for this and that there were going to be lots of students involved, I was particularly excited to participate. So thank you.
Well, we were glad to hear that. Good.
So yes, so I look after a really diverse set of customers at Amazon Web Services. And for those that may be new to even cloud computing and what we do at Amazon Web Services, we really provide a whole host of services and cloud computing capabilities for our customers to be able to really leverage their data for really useful business insights. That's sort of the most basic way of really thinking about what we do and how we support and help them. So our goal is to work with customers in the agriculture industry to really help them leverage data to understand their operations better and engage with their customers more deeply and delight their customers with new products and services. So we really provide all that backbone and infrastructure. And agriculture, as we all know and everyone on this call knows, is an incredibly complex and diverse industry. I think the concept of a value chain doesn't even describe it, right? Because it's really many intersecting systems. But we do look after, if we think about that end-to-end value chain from crop inputs all the way through to what happens, where and how we that ultimately come in contact with the food that we eat on our tables. We really do look after a very large portion of that value chain. So our customers include all of the major crop input companies, so the seed and crop protection and nutrition companies, all of the major equipment manufacturers that sell into the agriculture market, the very large food processors and integrated protein companies, and then, of course, many of the major enterprise scale fruit and vegetable producers are our customers as well. So our customers are not the individual farmer, but the individual farmer is really our customer's customer, right? So we're helping our customers build new products and services for that individual farmer in many cases in that value chain. And then when our customers' activities span, all the way through CPG and retail and really all the way through to the consumer, I have colleagues within the consumer packaged good and retail verticals that I collaborate with to really help design those full end-to-end solutions.
So with all of that, your job is just keep an eye out on the entire planet, right?
Right. Oh, and how could I forget? we also look after this incredibly large and growing group of very innovative ag tech startups, right? That really span that whole value chain and whose products and services are incredibly diverse, right? Hardware, in terms of, drones and sensors, as well as software and analytics capabilities and marketplaces, and all of the innovation that we're also seeing within that sector as well.
Yeah. Well, and just to speak to how small a world it is, you and I got connected through our mutual friend in New Zealand and Australia. So it's a global game, and we're delighted. Though right now you're focused on Monterey County and what we're up to. And so let's as you know, there are a lot of students, and we know that that's something kind of near and dear to your heart. But talk a little bit about your education. For those of you who haven't taken the time in the audience to look at Elizabeth's biography on the website, I encourage you to do that. And rather than read it to you, I'd rather talk about it a little bit with her, particularly your educational background, because you're a Berkeley graduate, you have an MBA from the University of Michigan, you hung out at Oxford University for a bit, but what I'm intrigued by is there was, everything was always minimally a twofer. Like at Berkeley, you're doing environmental science and policy. You look at kind of your MBA at the University of Michigan, and you're thinking about finance, strategy, and sustainability. It's almost like you have the perfect, from an educational standpoint, run up to the moment we are today, and we're at a time of great change. Obviously, the climate's at the center of that discussion. So, thinking back in that time, what were you thinking? Did you already have a game plan in mind? And with those thoughts, any advice for today's students as they think about the era they're about to embark on in terms of, finishing their studies and their professional careers?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny to look back, right? And you think, well, I think there was a method to my madness. So you can tell the story, retrospectively and make a lot of sense. Like there was a grand master plan. But I think, for all of us, right, we make decisions at particular points in time with the information that we have. But I think there are some guiding principles, right? So I was interested in environmental issues for as long as I could remember. I mean, as a little kid, I was asking questions about, well, why are we doing it that way? That seems wasteful. Or, starting the recycling program in my town before we actually had a municipal recycling program. I was always thinking that way and thinking about that and looking for ways, I think I just felt this need to be sort of more respectful about resources and the way we were behaving as stewards of our planet and the environment. And so that really guided all of my decision making. So I did choose to focus on environmental science at Berkeley, and could not have been more thrilled when I got in there to focus on that, because it was really an incredible program, and I got to learn from just incredibly experienced professors who were very deep in the research and had been for a very long time, and so learned a great deal from them. And science was at the root of that, but I also was really always focused on the practical applications of the science and how we could get it to influence and change behavior, right? So policy was a natural part of that. And then even when I made the decision to study at Oxford, it was very similar. I knew it was a great institution and I knew it would be an incredible experience, but I wanted to stay focused on that environmental science piece. And I did find a research center there to align my studies and my program with the Oxford Center for the Environment, Ethics, and Society. So again, just another great opportunity to pull in all those different interdisciplinary pieces. There it was law and economics and sociology, but all through that environmental lens, which, again, was just an incredible opportunity. And then I was very fortunate to go to work for the Environmental Defense Fund after college, which was one of the first organizations that was really thinking about, well, gosh, we really understand the science. We've got a lot of really, a lot of data, a lot of information. We're understanding how our impacts are influencing the natural environment. But there are other stakeholders that we need to get on board here. And they made some decisions very early on to really partner with the private sector and try to engage corporations in making the business case for focusing on environmental issues and really improving resource efficiency. So that was, and I was very fortunate to be able to join that group. And, that was also an incredible education, right? In terms of the learning there, again, from some incredibly renowned scientists that were part of that experience. But then kind of looking around and realizing, I think as you advance in your career or you start to make graduate school decisions, it's a lot about sort of taking stock of, okay, what have I learned? Where do I have some really strong foundations? And what else do I need to fill in, right? Where are some of my gaps and how can I continue to learn and broaden my skill set and my expertise? And for me, because I was getting exposed to major corporations and business decisions, I was aware of the fact that I wanted to really build out that skill set and develop, some capabilities in the areas of finance and strategy and really talking the talk and being able to make that business case from a strong foundation of those capabilities. And so that really led to my decision there for business school, and in a program that also had that environmental science and sustainability focus so that I could continue to keep that as part of the mix while I was building out those business skills.
Well, and as your professional career unfolded, obviously you spent a lot of time as an investor, and then you've worked for some pretty high-profile companies, Farmers Business Network, Indigo Ag, before you arrived on the scene at Amazon. And so, and Amazon themselves have, made some pretty visible commitments to climate change, that $2 billion fund, and then Jeff Bezos has a $10 billion fund. And I'm wondering, and it sounds like this is exactly what you would think. And, there's a lot of conversation about climate change, and, sometimes in the era we live in, it ends up being the equivalent of a beer commercial: tastes great, less filling, and it's a back and forth, as opposed to, it sounds like your thinking is the best approach is a really integrated approach that does bring policy, strategy, and business together. Indeed, that's the only way the needle can move.
I think so. I do believe that because these are very dynamic situations, right? If we even think about the topic of sustainability moving from something relatively niche 20 years ago to being relatively mainstream in the part of, pretty regular business dialogue across lots of different industries, that evolution has happened. But I think having sort of grown up as part of that, or my career sort of aligning with that, it was a matter of really understanding, okay, well, where are these conversations happening and where are they not happening, right? Where should we be trying to bring some of these insights, some of this understanding about what's happening on the sustainability front into other conversations, into that investor conversation, or, incorporating that into how we make investment decisions. And so I think that's another area, that I often encourage students or those that are thinking about, or, making decisions early in that career, is knowing, kind of taking stock and surveying that landscape of where you can be developing and learning, but then also taking notice of where you think certain conversations should be happening, and thinking about, okay, what will it take to do that? What do we need to share or say or know, or perspective that we need to bring in here that we might not have, right? And so that's where a lot of those different things come together: policy, business, science.
Well, and you said something the other day when we were visiting, just kind of, what we might talk about, and I asked you, well, how does Amazon look at this? And I thought you had a really interesting answer, and I think you just alluded to it. You said it's really not so much how we look at it, it's how our customers look at it. And can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think that idea of why conversations are so important in building a consensus. I mean, it sounds like on this type of issue and sustainability, that's really the business you are in. You're kind of one of the chief facilitators.
Right. Well, I think there's two parts to that, right? There's sort of what you know you can and should do as a business because you feel a responsibility to do that. And then there's also understanding what's important to your stakeholders, including your customers. So, so specifically from the Amazon Web Services side, we made a commitment pretty early on to move all of our energy infrastructure that powers AWS to renewable energy and really making investments in renewable energy projects that would allow us to be able to really lead with all of our infrastructure, right, is being powered by renewable energy. So those targets were originally set for 2030. And because we've had so much success in our renewable energy program, we've actually moved those up to 2025. And so AWS will be 100% powered by renewable energy by 2025. Well, that's something that we made a decision to do because we thought it was important. But it's also something that I share with our customers because, and especially in agriculture, right? So many of our customers have made commitments around really changing agriculture to be more sustainable. They're either trying to help farmers to do more with less, be more prescriptive in what they apply to their fields, or in one, helping farmers to be more water efficient with different technologies. So really leveraging different technologies and capabilities in order to produce high quality food with fewer inputs and fewer resources. So when I engage in a conversation with them and we're starting to talk about their business priorities and how we can help them scale and grow, I always share with them also that we're aligned there, right? AWS is really committed to, of course, running our business in the most environmentally sustainable way possible. And then of course that extends to Amazon as well with, some of the announcements that you just referenced. So I think it's about alignment, right? And I think that's important to customers. They want to know and understand that.
Right. Well, and it sounds like, and they're getting the virtual version of, they're giving us the T-5 sign, and we wanted. So we're getting near the end. So I guess the question. So a couple of questions based on what you're saying. It sounds like there's really a business case to be made for, businesses really getting aligned around this proposition of dealing with climate, dealing with sustainability. So it would really be a bit of a, for lack of a better word, a myth to think that, this is not a pro-business agenda to deal with climate, to deal with sustainability. Because I'm going to guess, kind of like the wise owl, you've got a pretty good vantage point from the telephone wire of what's going on, and it looks like business is just simply moving in this direction.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think we see it in so many different sectors of the economy, right? Because as consumers become more aware and as they have more platforms from which to communicate and share ideas and compare products or services, the dialogue around this has been elevated. And I think consumers are increasingly expecting, they want to know where and how products were made. They want to trust in that brand or feel good about how they're using their dollars. And so I think we've seen those reverberations all the way back through the supply chain at various points in terms of, those values really being articulated by consumers, and then the rest of the value chain really responding.
So knowing what you know now, and having kind of admitted maybe it was a little serendipitous, your education got put to great use, and knowing there's some students in the audience, any words of wisdom to impart to the students as they kind of think about the world on a go forward basis that for their careers?
Yes, always lead with what you are most curious about. So Amazon is famous for its leadership principles, and we have several of them. One of them is learn and be curious. And I think there's no, like, I think it's such a great guiding principle if you think about, gosh, if I follow what I'm most curious about, or, you know, what most captures my attention, I think that's where you activate your own, you know, your own superpowers, so to speak, right? In terms of, you're just going to be more excited about that work. You're going to be more aligned and engaged, and that stimulates creative thought and new ideas, right? And I think that's, at the end of the day, we have a lot of big challenges that we're all facing, and we need those new ideas and that fresh perspective. So I think there's leading with what, you know, is most curious, what you're most curious about, and then also aligning that with what you think is missing. You know, if there's a part of the conversation or part of that problem solving that isn't being addressed or is missing, you know, think about how you can fill that gap or bring the right party to that conversation to fill that gap.
Well, I think you've led to your own final question. With all of your experiences and with everything you're doing with Amazon, what are you the most curious about now?
Oh, wow.
And you only get a minute.
I only get a minute. Yeah. Well, I continue to be really curious about how there's a lot of discussion around traceability and the importance of really having a lot more visibility into what's happening in the supply chain. And I think COVID has really elevated that. And we're seeing that a lot of customers really wanting to have a much deeper understanding what's happening upstream and downstream to be able to respond better, be more resilient in the face of changing dynamics within a supplier value chain. And there's a lot of opportunity to knit together data and information across that value chain and really take a systems approach to that. And we're working on some of this, but there's a lot more to do. And this is an area where I continue to be really curious and really having fun leaning in with our customers to do this, to build some of these solutions at scale in a way that just hasn't been done before.
Good. Well, terrific. Well, listen, we really appreciate your taking the time to join us. And I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone in the audience. You were terrific. And while you were terrific in a virtual setting, as Dr. Ochoa said, this is the 14th time we've done this. In the previous 13 times after your talk, you would have been surrounded in the back of in the hall during refreshments with lots of questions. And so, thanks for an engaging conversation. And we're going to keep an eye on you for the future so we can surround you with those questions in person next time. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Well, you're so welcome. And I hope we all can be together in person very soon. That will be a good thing for all of us, right?
Well, yes, it would. You know, we would definitely would enjoy having you in person in Monterey. I think I'm trying to follow all our texts. I think they're giving me the.
Are we getting the gong? We're getting the hook?
No, actually, we're getting shut back on stage. You know, can you?
Oh.
The foibles of virtual shows. Well, you know, the other question, since you mentioned it, and because there is industry in the audience, this whole issue of supply chain, and obviously your Amazon Web Services, but you know, as I've given a few talks along the way in the last year or two, and who would have ever thought to put the two companies, Whole Foods and Amazon, in the same breath. So that whole issue of the supply chain, I know certainly with many of the grower shippers and processors that I'm familiar with in the Salinas Valley, they're thinking about that topic a lot. How is it changing, and traceability? Any observations for industry? You've had some great ones for students. Anything our friends in the Salinas and Pajaro Valleys ought to be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one where I've really been speaking to our customers a lot about thinking about cross-industry collaboration on this topic, because wherever an individual customer already manages their value chain, we can collect all the relevant information and really, pull together that solution that enables that traceability and transparency. But there are so many different connection points normally across that value chain, right? There are other stakeholders that play a role or that contribute at some point in that value chain, whether it's upstream or downstream. So, a lot of the conversation now, and where I'm getting increasingly engaged with our customers, is really thinking about, okay, so who else needs to be part of that as we build that and really think about those cross-industry collaborations. And I think that's a really interesting topic. And again, where our platform can really play a role, because if you have that one platform where all of that information, including from different stakeholders, can be captured and managed appropriately with the appropriate permissions and security and all of those things that we build in, that gets really interesting and really exciting, because that's when we can start to really look at these things at scale, especially when we're talking about global supply chains and
right.
And covering really managing for those complexities.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. I know some of the initiatives we're working on at Western Growers. We're looking to build new coalitions, and you really do try and leverage a platform on a global scale. And some of those things kind of seem like just phrases, but the reality is, from your perspective, platform's a very serious conversation.
Yes. Well, and I think historically maybe there hasn't been a way to easily share that information between different parties, and that that's been a bottleneck. What I hear often from customers of ours and then other stakeholders in that value chain is there can be a lot of friction in some of the handoffs in a value chain. And it's actually by looking at some of those, what are really business challenges, and understanding how we can make that handoff more, somehow, or that transaction or whatever's happening in that particular part of the value chain, make that smoother and eliminate some of that friction or some of the inefficiency that might exist there today. It might even be automating a process that's not automated, or there might be a cumbersome sort of paperwork trail or transfer that's part of that particular part of the value chain. And just by really looking at those particular challenges and figuring out a way to streamline them, make them more automated, more data-driven, that often opens up some of those opportunities, again, to create a scalable opportunity for traceability, but because we're looking at a friction point and addressing an operational inefficiency.
We'll give you one last question. It'll make you feel good, and it'll let you know you're on a university campus. We did get a question. What kind of jobs are there at Amazon that college graduates ought to be thinking about? If someone's interested in Amazon, what should they be thinking about?
Well, wonderful, because there are a lot of job listings. So we have an incredible search function that's just part of our jobs website, and I'm happy to send along a couple of links or something that would be useful to send out to the broader group and community and follow up. But there's a very comprehensive set of listings with a very good search feature in terms of being able to search for particular topics and job descriptions, and lots of different programs in terms of hiring at all levels and all different skill sets.
So good news, and this is a phrase that's near and dear to President Ochoa's heart. There are bright futures at Amazon for sharp young people, the type that CSUMB produces.
Absolutely, yes.
Terrific. Okay, I think we have finally. They're ready to give us the hook. So I know I can only withstand the trauma of so many 2-minute warnings. So I'm done if you're done. And thanks very much for joining us. And we're going to warn you, we're going to get you in person next time.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
Terrific. Thanks, Elizabeth, for a really terrific conversation. Good to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Take care.
Okay, you too. All right. Well, with that, I certainly want to thank Elizabeth for joining us. As I think you can pick up, she's got a lot of responsibility and is looking out for a fair amount of territory. Indeed, the whole planet. So we're grateful she was able to join us. We will be segueing to our next session. As I told you ahead of time, we're gonna have a couple of really terrific panels, and the moderators themselves are as sharp as the people they're going to be introducing us to. And speaking of sharp moderators, I'm pleased to welcome back Megan Nunes, who will be guiding us through our next panel. And so Megan, why don't I let you introduce yourself. You've undergone a name change since I've last seen you, so I'll let you fill in everybody on that, and then bring your group on board. You've got a great session for us coming up. So Megan, nice to see you, and you're on.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and thank you so much for having me back. It's very great to be back at CSUMB Greater Vision. And personally, I'm really looking forward to getting to talk with all of our all of our panelists today, and to kind of unpack the different areas and expertise that they provide. So hello to everybody. My name is Megan Nunes. I'm the founder and CEO of Bountiful. One of the things that we as a company do at Bountiful is something called yield forecasting. And one of the ways that we do that is through data techniques that involve using climate and weather data, as well as a ton of other data sources. And so for myself personally, this session around the intersection of climate and weather really speaks quite aligned to where I spend my days. And I'm looking forward to kind of getting to have a conversation at various scales. Well, we'll start with Mike Clancy, who is from the Citizen Climate Lobby, excuse me, and he's going to kind of give us a bird's eye view, if you will, of kind of the issues that are at hand around the intersection of climate and weather. So Mike, if you would like to get us started, please.
Well, thank you, Megan. And first of all, I'd like to say thanks to everyone who sponsored this event. It's a wonderful event, particularly Lisa Dobbins for putting this on. I'm going to show some slides. I'm going to provide an overview of the science pertaining to climate change, weather and climate change as pertains to agriculture. So bear with me here. We're going to go to some slides. And the first graphic I'm showing you here talks about the difference between weather, climate variability, and climate change. It's important to understand that. Three broad classes of phenomena in the atmosphere. And the thing that differentiates these phenomena is in fact increasing time scale and space scale. Now, time scale is just a fancy way of saying lifetime of a phenomenon. Space scale is just a fancy way of saying the size or the domain of influence of a phenomenon. And to the far left here, we have weather. Weather happens on time scales of minutes to months, and space scales of 10 kilometers to about 1,000 kilometers, ranging from thunderstorms to blocking patterns in the jet stream. In the middle range here, extending from in time scales of months to decades, space scales about the size of the Pacific Ocean basin, we have climate variability, also known as internal variability or natural variability. And this involves things we're actually familiar with, for example, El Nino, La Nina. In the Atlantic, it's the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, things like that, which give us warm years followed by cold years, wet years, followed by dry years, and that sort of thing. And then finally, on the right-hand side of this graphic, we have climate change. Climate change extends from decades, centuries, even out to millennia, and is in fact a global phenomenon. Now, one thing I'd like you to take home today is the following idea, and that is if you're looking at climate change, if you're trying to understand climate change, looking at trends pertaining to climate change, you really need to be looking at records that are 30 years or longer. If you're looking at a record that's 20 years or shorter, you're not looking at climate change. You're looking at climate variability, or if you're looking at days to weeks, you're looking at weather. 20 to 30 years is kind of gray area, but you'd really like to be closer to that 30-year trend line if you're talking about climate. Actually, 50 years would be even better. So with that background, I want to show you this graphic, which shows the global mean surface temperature of the Earth by year from 1850 to 2017. Now, surface temperature over the ocean is the sea surface temperature. Over the land and over the sea ice is the temperature a few meters above the surface. Global mean implies averaged over the entire face of the Earth, from pole to pole all the way around. And these 5 different sources shown here all depict the same picture. And that picture is as follows. Beginning about 1900, there was a significant increase in temperature such that we are now running about 1.2 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial level. Now, there was about a 30-year period of a slight decline here, but overall, we see over the last 120 years or so, there's been a significant increase in global mean surface temperature of the Earth, such that you have to go back about 125,000 years, that's 14 human civilizations in time, to find an Earth that's as warm as it is today. Note also these zigs and zags here. Well, that's in fact the climate variability we were just talking about. Just because you have a cold year following a warm year or a wet year following a dry year doesn't mean you start a new trend. That's the short-term, decades sort of variability, climate variability. What you really need to focus on, what we really need to be concerned about is the long-term trend, the 30-year or longer trend. So what's going on here? Well, in fact, it is the greenhouse effect. There was an overwhelming international scientific consensus on this matter. It is not in doubt. It is not scientifically in doubt. It has been settled actually decades ago. It's pretty straightforward. It works like this. The Earth is warmed by incoming solar radiation, also known as shortwave radiation. And the Earth cools in 2 ways. Reflected shortwave radiation and outgoing longwave radiation, also known as infrared radiation. Greenhouse gases trap the outgoing longwave radiation and warm the Earth, the lower atmosphere, and the surface of the Earth. And finally, human activities increase greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and increase the warming. So what are these greenhouse gases? Well, these are listed in order of how much infrared radiation that they actually trap in the atmosphere. And the top of the list is water vapor, which we perceive as humidity. Water vapor actually traps more greenhouse gas or more infrared radiation than any other gas, followed by carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and the F gases or the fluorinated gases. Note that I've colored these gases differently than water vapor. That's because water vapor is not driving global warming. Water vapor contributes to global warming through the water vapor feedback loop, but water vapor does not drive global warming. That's because water vapor is in fact in balance with the global hydrologic cycle. Humans are not putting water vapor into the atmosphere in any large amount, and the residency time for water vapor in the atmosphere is very short. These other gases that I've colored magenta here, these are the anthropogenic greenhouse gases. These, in fact, are the ones that are driving global warming. Humans are putting these gases in the atmosphere in large amounts. They are not in balance with any natural cycle, and they have a very long residency time in the atmosphere. In the case of CO2, or residency times ranging from decades to hundreds of years to actually thousands of years. So where are these greenhouse gases coming? They're causing this warming. Well, globally, it looks like this. These are the broad economic sectors that you can associate with greenhouse gas emissions. The top 3 account for about 2/3: electricity and heat production, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, industrial production. Those account for about 2/3 of the gas emissions. You might be surprised that transportation is actually pretty low, only about 14%. So agriculture plays a role here. And we'll break it out like this. About half of this sector is in fact ag globally. About 11% of global emissions are produced by global agriculture. More than half of that is coming from livestock, raising of livestock. About 6% of global emissions are due to livestock. You may have heard that famous saying, if cattle were their own nation, they would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, right behind China and the United States. Following that is synthetic fertilizers, mainly nitrogen-based fertilizers, which decay into nitrous oxide. Rice cultivation is huge, particularly in Asia, particularly with regard to methane production. And finally, various other things, such as burning of crop residues, tilling and plowing, which releases CO2 from the soil, and manure applied to soils, which releases methane. So it's a 2-way street between climate change and agriculture. Agriculture affects climate change through the release of greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect that we just talked about. But obviously climate change also affects agriculture. And so the question is, what kind of effects would we be expecting here in California? What are the expected climate trends in California looking out to the end of this century? Well, what we can expect is continued warming and drying out of the state, particularly in Southern California. What we're looking at here is a long-term trend in soil moisture. You can see particularly in terms of percentage change. You can see particularly in Southern California, the state is continuing to dry out rapidly. But even here in the Salinas Valley, we can expect continued drying. More frequent and intense droughts. In the worst case scenario of business as usual greenhouse gas emissions, by the end of the century, by 2100, we would expect severe droughts to happen about twice as often. So droughts that we would expect to happen about every 20 years, we would expect to happen about every 10 years and so forth. And finally, one you may not have thought about, that is sea level rise. I don't expect sea level rise is going to cause us to lose a lot of farmland in the Salinas Valley, but it is likely that sea level rise will exacerbate saltwater intrusion into the Salinas Valley aquifer, which is a significant issue for local agriculture. So that's it, and I hope I didn't hit you with too much stuff there, but that's kind of an overview of the two-way street between climate and agriculture.
Thank you
And
so
I'm
much.
going to end my share now and turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for that overview of kind of separating out the views of weather and climate and how they relate together, and setting timescales to all of those things, because I do feel like that's one area that grossly goes kind of misunderstood, especially in a lot of these types of conversations. Next up, we're going to hear from Forrest Melton, who is a researcher at NASA, and he also is a professor at CSUMB. And specifically, one of the things Forrest is going to get to touch on for us is kind of some of the data that can exist in order for us to be able to answer some of these questions around how climate is effectively impacting our crops, and really looking forward to him highlighting some of his research that he's been currently working on. So Forrest, welcome, and take it on.
All right, thanks, Megan. That was a nice overview from Mike, and by coincidence, we've been stuck inside due to the poor air quality here the last couple of weekends. Been going through old boxes and papers, and I came across some of my old notes from college when I was learning about climate change. And I was lucky because some of my professors at the time were actually working on the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change reports, on those first reports. So out of curiosity, I went back and looked at some of those reports from 1990 and 1992. And what was really amazing to me is just how many things they got right. Not just the temperature projections and that trends in temperature that Mike showed, but also the number of extreme events, projected impacts to sea level rise, increasing frequency of drought and water scarcity, the extent and severity of wildfires, and the loss of ice contained in glaciers and ice sheets. And I think the projections on the breakup of ice sheets is really significant, since at the time, those had been intact for pretty much all of human history and for hundreds of thousands of years prior to that. And if anything, the main weaknesses, I think, in those early reports was really underestimating the speed at which the changes would arrive. Another thing that struck me looking through those reports from 1990 and 1992 is that they all back then identified that further national and international research was needed on regional effects of climate change on crop yields, livestock productivity, and production costs. I think that's still true today. And identification of agricultural management practices and technology appropriate for a changed climate. And these are still things that are highlighted in the most recent IPCC reports and the US National Climate Assessment, but we're starting to see really rapid progress, I think, on the development of new agricultural practices and technology. And here on the Central Coast, probably our most important action is going to be to continue and even accelerate work to protect the resilience of our water supplies. As Mike showed, we are definitely vulnerable to increased frequency and intensity of drought. Unlike other parts of the state, we are, of course, entirely dependent here on local water supplies, and protecting especially our groundwater resources is really important. And given that the most recent IPCC reports and climate change projections all point to accelerating rates of temperature increase and further increases in the frequency of extreme events, I think protecting those water supplies is probably at the top of the list for us in terms of important adaptation actions here locally. And at the same time, to do this, we really need new information tools. Elizabeth touched on this, that are going to help us manage water supplies effectively and to accelerate the use of data-driven approaches for water management. Here at CSUMB, we've been working on tools to help with water management, both at the field scale and then also across the Western US. So whether it's an irrigator waking up early in the morning to go out and turn on pumps or open a valve, or a state or federal water planner that's trying to balance water supply and water demand for an entire river basin, we are working on tools to make their job easier, to give them the data they need to help inform their resource management decisions. So at the field scale, here at CSUMB, we've been working with Dr. Michael Kahn and Richard Smith over at the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources, our cooperative extension partners here in the Salinas Valley. And we've been working with them on the development of irrigation and nutrient management, decision support systems and software that are really going to work in the field for production agriculture. Dr. Kahn and his team have developed an application called Crop Manage, which brings together data on weather conditions, soil type information about the irrigation system, distribution uniformity, and combines it with crop and nutrient uptake models in order to provide really pretty accurate irrigation and fertilizer recommendations. And we've been working with Michael and his team to now integrate satellite measurements in near real time, so we can get measures of the crop canopy to help account for year-to-year and field-to-field variability in crop development, and then support expansion of crop managed to other crops, especially vineyard and orchard crops, so other high-value specialty crops. And we've been working with cooperative extension and with our agricultural partners to do field trials. And through these, I think we've demonstrated that relative to a more static approach to irrigation scheduling, more widespread use of these dynamic, data-driven tools can help sustain crop yields and quality, while also supporting reductions in applied water. And the trials to date have shown reductions of anywhere between 20 to 40%, in addition to reductions in nitrate leaching of up to 75%, and reduction in fertilizer applications of up to 50%. And so these benefits, especially the reductions in fertilizer applications required, they will result in cost savings while also providing benefits for water quality and reductions in nitrous oxide emissions, which is, that's really the way that fertilizer, as Mike talked about, that's really the way that the fertilizer can contribute to increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Nitrous oxide is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. It's about 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide in terms of its heat trapping effects. And I want to note that it's really, none of this work that we've done would be possible without our agricultural partners in the Salinas Valley. We've been really lucky. They've been generous with their time in helping us with the trials, support of the work to develop data-driven approaches that are actually going to work for folks in the field. And it's almost impossible for the science community to move forward on any of these challenges without partnership and help from growers and agricultural companies here locally. And then at scale, the scale of the Western US, CSUMB has also been co-leading a national effort to use satellite data to map evapotranspiration across the Western US and to make that information easily available through a new web application and data system called OpenET. And OpenET is making information specifically on evapotranspiration available, because evapotranspiration is this really key piece of data we need to do a better job of managing our water resources. It measures the water that's being lost from the land surface to the atmosphere, and is a key measure of water use from irrigated agriculture and other vegetation. It's the largest component of the water cycle after precipitation. But prior to this effort, we really had no way to consistently measure that across the Western US. Now CSUMB, NASA, the Desert Research Institute, and EDF are co-leading a team of 40 scientists and software engineers working with over 100 partners in the agriculture and water management sectors to solve this problem. So that's going to go live next year, and I'm really excited about it. Overall, the patterns I see is that we're getting to the point where we can start to implement data-driven solutions at scale here locally and across the West. And I think we've almost solved the last mile problem. We're down to really the last sort of 100 yards. And the last piece of this puzzle is the creation of market incentives and rewards for growers who are adopting these tools. And I think that's where companies like yours, like Bountiful, and other companies that are working on delivering analytics across the supply chain are really, really important. Because there are risks, right, for irrigators and ranch managers. When you're irrigating crops worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per acre, you can't afford to under-irrigate. So if we're going to ask them to take on these risks, we have to create market-based policies and supply chain incentives that are going to reward growers and field staffs that are the early adopters of these tools and approaches. So I could go on probably all afternoon about this, but I really want to hear from Tim and hear his perspectives from someone who's working in the field every day to try to address these types of challenges. So thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Forrest, and thank you for that wonderful overview. So next up, we will hear from Tim Escamilla, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Dole. And Tim, I'm really looking forward to having you get to share real world experience and how climate and weather changes are impacting your job now, and how you've had to maybe pivot some of the thinking or ways in which that you guys have been changing your operational needs in order to meet kind of a changing atmosphere, if you will. So take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Megan, and everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. So yes, I'm the Chief Operating Officer, Senior Vice President here at Dole Fresh Vegetables, responsible for their agricultural production as well as the overall manufacturing, food manufacturing of our salads and bowls and other fresh food activities we do. So very passionate about fresh food. I've been in the fresh food industry my entire life, 30 plus years professionally, and there's nothing more relevant for anyone, young person considering an opportunity in the fresh food space. It's extremely relevant with regards to climate change, sustainability, agricultural labor, food security, you name it. It's very, very relevant. And we need bright, young, smart people to enter this food space, this fresh food space. So I encourage you to listen from a technological perspective or any other perspective, marketing, sales, business. There's great opportunities here in the fresh food space. So really encourage you all to look at that. So climate change, without a doubt, has been occurring on the Western United States and throughout North America, at least through my experience, over at least 30 years. Where things were done 30 years ago to where they are today, particularly in Siemens Valley, it's changed significantly because agricultural production at a very large scale, it's very similar. Meaning there's the planning, pre-planning, you got to think about kind of the maturation cycle of production. You got to think about overall the supply chain to get food to table, et cetera. But it's all these microclimates in all these different regions across the world that make your specific region very, very important. And we have a great microclimate here, and it has been changing. So companies such as Dole Food Company, great big food companies, right? It's very important to have a sustainability message. Several reasons. Consumers, as I talked at the beginning, it's very relevant. Consumers want to know where their food's coming from. They want to know what's going into it, whether it's safe. Many care about sustainability. And so big food companies such as Dole, they have big, great aspirations. Several aspirations Dole Food Company has, for example, is on our internal farming, and we farm throughout the world. And on our internal farms to have a net zero greenhouse gas effect by, I believe it's 2040 or 2030, I take it back. We also have measurements to reduce water consumption. And so these are great big aspirations that it starts at a very high level, corporate level. And we have to eventually work it down to tactics, to tactically execute. I can tell you that in my own experience right now, one example of where we're trying to take corporate aspirations of reducing irrigation, for example, or water consumption, as well as nitrates, is down in the desert in Yuma, Arizona. So those of you familiar with Yuma, Arizona know that there's a lot of flood irrigation, furrow irrigation, not a tremendous amount of drip irrigation. And we're approaching it, recognizing that the goal of our organization is to try to reduce water waste, and reduce nitrates leaching into the ground for all the various reasons that Mike and Forrest talked about. So how do we go about doing this, right? Well, you know, we go about it recognizing what are the other benefits for using drip irrigation. An example is that you have great big headlands on both sides of a field if you're going to irrigate via furrow. We pick that land up. If we were able to gain that land from a farming perspective, we end up farming less acreage over the long run. Now, the desert, Imperial as well as Yuma, the way that the irrigation systems are designed, they're not necessarily designed great for applying drip irrigation. So we're going to take this on as a team. We're farming approximately 80 acres, 100 acres this year on non-traditional drip crops, such as iceberg lettuce and romaine, particularly in Yuma. And we're going to continue to measure the consumption of fuel as well as the consumption of nitrates, whether it be fertilizer. And our expectation is that we're going to consume less water, expand the overall footprint or yield of that acreage, and then compare it to what we're doing just across the ditch in terms of consumption. And our expectations are to see a reduction and continue to improve and enhance the usage of drip irrigation in the desert to ultimately achieve our objectives of reduction of nitrates as well as less water consumption. So there are plenty of examples that I could talk about how we go from tactics down to or from strategy down to tactics. I think it's also important to recognize that we always are changing. So climate change, particularly our climate vulnerability, as described by Mike, is an example of days to harvest, right? Our days to harvest has definitely been reducing, meaning where before we could expect 75 days to harvest of lettuce, it's dropping down to 70. In the desert, as we expect, as daylight reduces, we're having real tough challenges on transitions, whether you're going from the Salinas Valley into San Joaquin or into Yuma. And so we manage it by ultimately, at least Dole's strategy has been to focus in on really narrowing down kind of our transition windows and finding optimal areas where we can recognize maximum yields, because there's no question that in order to reduce our footprint, we have to increase our yields. And so we're definitely trying to drive our yields and by looking at optimal areas of production, even within the microclimates of every producing region, whether it's South County and Monterey County versus North County, they have an optimal time slot of production. And we absolutely are working towards being in each microclimate at its optimal level for timing of production to maximize our yields. So all this technology that's been described, whether it be by Forrest, right, or even the changes that Mike explained, right, are critical, and how we receive the information and perceive the information, interpret the information, right, to make it very actionable is critical ultimately to provide the food supply, right? So I want to make sure that again, what I would say to young people, anyone, right, but particularly young people, my final thoughts are this: you really need to be passionate in life and find what you're good at and maximize what you're good at with your passion, because if you align those two things, you will be very successful. And success as you ultimately determine, because success is not driven monetarily, it's driven by fulfillment. And so if you're completely passionate about something and you're good at whatever, you align those things together and you will be extremely successful and fulfilled in your life. So Megan, thanks for allowing me to speak here. I appreciate the time, and any questions?
Cool. Thank you so much, Tim. That was awesome. That was a really great overview. And specifically, I love that you touched on the importance of needing to measure in order to understand your current baseline to figure out how to make those improvements, and where within kind of the footprint in which that you currently farm, should you maybe re-strategize and think about maybe how to do things differently. And it all starts with that first foundation of gathering the data and information to measure, to then kind of figure out how to improve upon. So thank you. Well, we're now going to begin the question and answer portion of our panel. And one of the things I would like to remind everyone that there is a Q&A box down at the bottom that you can go ahead and click and submit your questions there if you do have any for all of the speakers. And while we are waiting for some of those to come in, I think one area I would just really like to start in is specifically because as Mike so politely pointed out, climate is as the study of decades and decades and decades, essentially, of weather information, understanding how the changes of weather are making changes and impacts on our climate and on our planet. So for all of us as individuals who today kind of are looking for, I don't know, fast results, if you will, why should we encourage people and individuals to kind of study and take the time to really understand this intersection of climate and weather? And specifically, why have you folks chosen to dedicate your time to do this at the intersection, specifically in food and agriculture. And whoever wants to go first is welcome to go first.
Well, Megan, you bring up a really good point here, and that is because climate change occurs on such long time frames, oftentimes it's hard for us as humans to really appreciate it. And I appreciate Tim's comments that in the 30 years he's been in the business, he's seen the effect there. But 30 years is a long time. It's about a length of a person's career, and the average person dealing day to day doesn't necessarily really appreciate those changes. We really have to think long term. We have to think about the impact on future generations. What's the impact on our children, our grandchildren, and our great-great-grandchildren? You really need to think long-term, because climate change is a long-term thing, and it requires long-term solutions, and it requires a global solution. There's nothing one thing I'd like to leave everyone is the fact that we can't fix the problem here in Salinas Valley. It's a global problem. The United States can't fix it. It's a global problem. We have to join together. That's why the Paris Climate Accord was so important. Unfortunately, the US has pulled out of that. Climate change is a global phenomenon. It requires a global solution, and it is a long-term phenomenon. We can't fix it overnight. If we were to stop all greenhouse gas emissions instantly today with a magic wand, the Earth would continue to warm for years and years, maybe even decades, before it would eventually stabilize. So long time frames involved here, and a global problem.
I would like to add that an interesting aspect about technology is 30, 40 years ago, particularly in the Western agricultural production world, right? We had lots of microclimates, and we had lots of production areas, meaning from Salinas, you'd go to Fireball down into Bakersfield onto just all these changes. And through technology, it's interesting enough, through technology, right, we were able to enhance different growing regions, expand them, make them longer, whether it be in genetics of plant breeding, to expand windows of production, so that we could stay in places longer and reduce the moves. But in doing so, we've also then impacted the overall climate of that specific microclimate. Mm-hmm. And so when I've talked about earlier in my discussion about kind of looking at optimal microclimates, we ourselves are going back to some of those microclimates that we used to farm 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and try to understand, right, it was more optimal at a certain point in time because of the weather, right? And so today, those optimal, at least what we've observed, right, those optimal periods in those specific microclimates are still very optimal. So it's the transition areas where we've kind of recognized that we're seeing the great impact of climate change. Really the transition areas of going from trying to stay longer in Salinas and go straight to Yuma. Those transition areas are where those days to harvest metrics are blown up. They don't 5-year averages don't work, 2-year averages don't work. It's almost a throw of the dice depending on what's going to happen. I would think that when I think of kind of climate change and how to manage my career in climate change, right? We want to minimize for sure our overall contribution to changing the climate. Me as an individual, as well as the organizations I want to work for. And then secondarily, right, try to leverage your expertise and knowledge to create value. So
I'll just add to that, Megan, that I think protecting our water supplies and sustaining agricultural production as we experience the effects of climate change are probably the two biggest challenges facing our country today. I'd say these are two of the most important long-term problems that we will need people listening in the audience to help solve. And if you're someone who enjoys solving problems, there are no shortage of interesting, challenging problems to be addressed. And I think one of the things you probably heard from the panel is there's opportunities to do that through research, through science, through business, through supply chain management, whether you're working at the scale of an individual field or an entire river basin. There are really interesting opportunities to make a positive impact and affect meaningful change. And even if you decide not to work in this field, being an educated consumer is more important than ever. We're all going to be asked to vote on ballot initiatives and make decisions as a community about how we spend resources to respond to climate change. So being able to be an informed consumer and an informed voter is as important now as it's ever been.
That's awesome. Couldn't agree more, and ditto to all of you. We did get a couple interesting questions that all seemingly are within the same theme. So I'm going to summarize them into one question for our last 5 minutes together. And that is, In terms of being involved in either climate change, and if you're not an agriculture major, what are some career paths or potentially educational paths that you could still make some of those impacts if you're not necessarily in the College of Agriculture, let's say right now, studying crop science or ag business per se, that you could still kind of develop a career post-graduation?
I'll just say, I think that as I mentioned at the end of my remarks, thinking about supply chain incentives and how we create market mechanisms to incentivize innovation, reward companies that are taking risks, shift all the risk from right now. A lot of it falls on the irrigator right now, right? And so if I was irrigating a field, I would always put on extra water. I'd be terrified to under irrigate, right? So how do we create incentives to shift some of that risk? How do we create rewards for folks that are leaders in innovation through market-based mechanisms and supply chain? I think that's a really interesting business problem and one that hasn't been fully solved yet. Like, is there an equivalent for organics that looks at, green growing practices across the board that we can implement? So I think there are a lot of opportunities, and then outreach and education. So much more to be done in terms of educating the public, educating consumers. I think just about any angle you're interested in, any skill set you have can be brought to bear on this problem.
I would reiterate what I said earlier. I have 2 young daughters, and I say young, but they're college age, so they're part of this constituent group. And what I've encouraged my daughters, and I encourage all of you, is truly find what your passion is. Follow your passion and match your passion with what you're good at. So if you're good at numbers and you like finance, you could be very good. And if you're passionate about social responsibilities, line those 2 things up, and you'll be great. You'll never work a day in your life, right? Again, being good at something doesn't necessarily mean you could be a good scientist. You could be a good, if you're very extroverted and you like to be in front of people, you can be a great salesperson, right? But having passion of what you're doing and I think is ultimately will be the most important for you in the long run. So.
Great advice from Tim and Forrest there both. And I'll just quickly throw in, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the green energy field, in wind turbines and solar and all those kinds of things. That's a growing field, and I think it's one area that makes me optimistic about the future, the fact that those technologies are coming along so well and are becoming so economically viable.
I can also say one other thing, which is I have never once in the last 20 years woken up and wonder, why am I going to work? Why am I doing this? And so I think that's one of the most rewarding things about working in this field is the sense of purpose and mission. The other thing I'll say is, as a scientist, you never stop learning. So I think as you're going through your education, just recognize how you learn, how you acquire new skills, what works best for you is really important to observe, because I find, every month, every year, there's a new skill set I have to acquire and master. And some of them I had no idea I would have to, giving talks over Zoom to hundreds of people was not something that was really on my radar 6 months ago. So.
Yeah, I can relate to. And I think all of that is a kind of a nice way to kind of put a bow around our session and close it out. I think what many of you kind of touched on also aligns well with how Elizabeth ended her fireside chat with Dennis. And that is, like, we as individuals should continuously seek to learn. And as long as we are finding ourselves in that position, we will constantly be fulfilled in the work that we are doing, as we're looking to kind of also find ways to apply that knowledge. So with that, thank you to all of you, and thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and sharing with all of us a little bit of a kind of your perspective and your view of where you sit at the intersection of climate and weather and agriculture. And thank you so much for having me. So I will turn it now over, I believe, because I got my 5-minute warning about 10 minutes ago, to Dennis. So thank you.
I'm delighted for the next panel to be headed up by the CEO and president of Braga Ranch and Josie's Organics, Rod Braga. So Rodney, you're on, and I've already sold you as a very august group of who's who. So no pressure to you and your team. And why don't you chat a little bit about current climate and sustainability and ag? So with that, you're on, Rod.
Thank you, Dennis. And it's been very insightful so far listening to everybody. A little background of who we are at Braga Fresh. We've been farming since 1928 in the Salinas Valley. So we kind of do everything from in the ground to then package the product and our own processing. So it was very interesting to hear everything that was happening with everyone else and listening to Tim and what Dole's doing. And I'm very interested to our panel and what's happening. You know, one of the things that we've got going on is we use about 2 million gallons of diesel fuel a year. So we understand that our greenhouse gas effect is huge, and we want to obviously bring that down. And through some of the technologies, we've been able in the last 10 years increase our acres by about 20%, but lower our overall diesel usage by 20% through some technologies. We know we need to do a lot better, right? So from that, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, who is Nicole Floyl, who is Director of Sustainability at Taylor Farms. And Nicole, with Taylor Farms being the largest, I think, food company probably in the world in fresh vegetables, I'd imagine that being the Director of Sustainability is a major emphasis there.
Hi, Rod. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, you know, there's really never a dull day in my job as Director of Sustainability for Taylor Farms. I've been with the company for 12 years, and I've worked in a variety of roles from administration to quality assurance and food safety, into business intelligence, and then finally into my role as Director of Sustainability about 6 years ago. We have had a phenomenal journey when it comes to sustainability. We really started dabbling in this area about 2012, I believe, was our first, toe dip into the energy world. And we did a Bloom fuel cell project at our facility in Salinas. And, quickly after that, we started venturing into solar and then into wind turbines and so on and so forth. And so it's been a really interesting journey for us to explore on the facility side, just how we can play with sustainability and how that has a real business case for us, as a business. And as we have increasing operating costs and, just the cost of doing business continues to go up year over year, we really found sustainability to be a valuable asset for us in helping us to control our costs, have a positive environmental benefit, and really allowing us to help benefit our communities. And so as we've continued to venture and to grow, we now have 6 solar installations across our facilities in North America. We have 3 zero waste programs. Those are true platinum zero waste certified processing facilities. We've got 2 in Salinas and 1 at our facility in Gonzales. This is something that's going to be going across the country. We are a small team. It's a team of 2. So we're taking these challenges on day by day. And as we've become a vertically integrated company over the last few years, we're really starting to focus on farm and looking at the sustainability metrics on farm that we can take and implement within our business, become a, optimize our on-farm processing, reduce the inputs, maximize the outputs, as we look at as a totally holistic approach to our sustainability efforts.
It's so interesting of what you guys are doing from the farm through everything, and I'm really interested. I think before we get on to some of the panels on some of what you guys have done, like with the different energy. If you wanted to expand on that a little bit, I know you've done everything from wind to solar. I'm just curious a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've explored into wind, solar, fuel cells, and cogeneration. And we're really starting to dabble with microgrids and just understanding how we can be a self-sustaining entity. We want clean, reliable, and affordable power for our processing facilities. Many of our facilities in California lie within the PG&E utility grid, which I think many of us know has been a real challenge over the last few years. Last year, we were affected by a PSPS event, and that shut our facility down for 3 days. And, with our business in the way of having a raw commodity, having operations shut down for 3 days is incredibly impactful. And so we're really playing in this microgrid space to see if we could become truly energy independent and run our facilities off of renewable and alternative energy resources, and how that will look and possibly change the entire industry.
Well, it's very interesting. It sounds like, doing the microgrid, perhaps the next venture will be Taylor Farms will be in its own energy business and maybe actually producing solar or wind energy and end up selling it to others possibly, right?
It's probably not as far away as you think it might be.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think we'll try to move on now and save some questions for others for you later. Our next panelist is Matt Mueller, Director of Open Innovations and Technology Acquisition and Licensing for Corteva Agriscience. Quite a big title there. Matt, do you want to fill us in a little bit on what all that means?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rod, for the introduction. It is a mouthful, I have to admit. So, but essentially what I'm responsible for at Corteva Agriscience is to basically focus on bringing the outside technology and innovation into the company. But perhaps many of you may wonder, who is Corteva Agriscience? We're still a relatively young company. Corteva Agriscience is a pure ag company that was spun off after the merger of Dow and DuPont in 2017. And we have a beautiful purpose. The purpose is to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume to ensure progress for generations to come. And so the company focuses on innovation in seeds and traits and crop protection and digital solutions. It comprises today about 21,000 employees spread over 140 countries. And in 2019, we generated $14 billion in revenue. Now, I said we're a young company. We actually went public less than 18 months ago. So you could say that we're really just a giant startup at this point. What I'd say is, for us, sustainability is personal. And we have a saying which is that we're fanatically focused on helping our farmer customers build up the value of their land at a time where adaptation to climate change and sustainability demands are higher than they've ever been before. But we also believe that sustainability in ag has really come of age. There is now a clear pull for sustainability from consumers, something that's kind of unprecedented. And we really have the technology to address it. So at Corteva, we didn't really wait for sustainability to be in fashion. We are already leaders in green chemistry with more crop protection products derived from natural sources than any other company in the world. And now if we combine these products with advances in data science, basically integrate precision agriculture and the seeds, which are sort of the foundation of our company, we have these seeds increasingly adapted to these climate demands, and we can provide the farmers with systems to optimize productivity, profitability, and sustainability. So in other words, today, rather than just selling bags of seeds or crop protection products, we integrate advances in biology, data science, computer vision, satellite imagery to propose sustainable cropping systems that provide farmers with decision tools that then deliver environmental benefits to their lands. So for example, this year we launched a pasture management product called LandVisor, which integrates satellite imaging to detect weeds and advice on when and where to treat with crop protection. So this is something that was impossible before we had this integration of satellite imagery and data management, and that provides great tools to manage large expanses of land as ranchers have to. So we put a lot of emphasis on collaboration in an ecosystem of innovation stimulated by many startups. For example, we launched a cell phone app that allows agronomists to do image-based disease detection, identification rather, and that's been done in a collaboration with a German startup called Pete. We're also collaborating with startups on fungal spore detection to have an early warning to diseases that may move into a region. We're also focusing on insect detection in the field the same way. All of this is basically geared towards developing more precise, sustainable ag practices that ultimately reduce the footprint of agriculture on our planet. And so in June of this year, on our first anniversary, we launched our sustainability goals for 2025 and 2030. And it's basically a set of 14 goals with metrics that are organized in 4 themes, focusing on farmers, the land, communities, and our own operations. Our goals are about increasing soil health and training farmers in the adaptation to climate change and carbon sequestration. By 2025, all our products will meet sustainability metrics. For example, we'll have yield improvement metrics so that there is less land conversion, less deforestation, basically across the world. We'll have metrics that focus on increased water use efficiency and reduced use rates of crop protection chemicals. So what I'd say is today we see a bright future for agriculture in partnership with other innovators and our farmer customers, where thanks to advances in biology and data science, we're now moving beyond precision agriculture and towards predictive ag. It's a very exciting future.
Thank you, Matt. Very extensive. Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Amy Francetic, and she's the founder and managing partner of Buoyant Ventures. Hi, Amy. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's great to be here. And I loved hearing Matt's overview because he's at just the kind of company that we hope to fund at an earlier stage, one that would hopefully grow into being as successful as Corteva. But what he said is a really good example of our investment thesis, where we're looking to use digital technologies to help improve output, reduce inputs for folks in the agricultural industries as well as other industries. And I'm really happy to be here and would love to just share my screen, if I could, to take you through just a couple of slides that show a little bit about our thesis and how we think about investment opportunities in this space. So let me try this. So this is, our thesis is investing in digital climate solutions, and we are really looking for technology, software, hardware, new business models that can help reduce the climate impacts across the energy, mobility, agriculture, and the built environment industries. We're looking for both ways to reduce emissions, and so to help mitigate climate change, as well as ways to identify adaptation opportunities. So investment opportunities for growth and productivity considering climate change. And for the most part, these digital technologies are interfacing with the physical world. So whether it's with the farms themselves or infrastructure, buildings, equipment, that kind of thing. And this is really coming from a lot of the terrific progress in machine learning and artificial intelligence that has evolved over the last several years, to the point where now you can, really get access to large amounts of data and use these great tools to make sense of all that data to help businesses become more resilient. And one area we're really excited about is this climate risk intelligence space. So we've been researching businesses across a variety of different categories that are taking publicly available data sets on climate and applying either some of their secret sauce and their algorithms to draw some useful insights for communities and business owners, or they're also capturing some unique data from sensors and equipment that they can layer on top of the publicly available data. And I just point out that we're seeing a lot of great companies in the sort of ag and water space here. But there's a number of folks that have been, started over the last few years looking at new ways to ensure folks in very high climate risk areas like California from wildfires, like coastal areas from floods, but also in the ag space, really trying to use data that they have. Like an interesting company we just talked to is Scoot Science. They're in Santa Cruz, not far from you guys, so I wanted to call them out. And they have a really wonderful database of data intelligence on oceans. And so they can sell their insights to folks that are fishing in the oceans, as well as folks that are trying to invest in those fisheries. And we've made one investment so far. It's in a company called Raptor Maps that's using software and intelligence to analyze drone footage that's captured of large-scale solar systems. And they can turn those insights into very, very important reports for the owners, operators, and the maintenance engineers of the solar system. So they can identify panels that need maintenance This is very useful when there's a warranty claim, but they are also recording all of the performance data of the solar system and putting it in kind of a Carta-like platform for solar, so that when there is a financing opportunity for that solar installation, if someone new comes in with new capital, that they can pull upon this data to really understand and analyze the performance output of that system. So super excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. So as I'm looking through the questions here that I'm looking on our little chat room questions, and which is very appropriate. I think the very first one for everyone would be, since we're talking to these university kids here, is what are some of the career opportunities from each organization that you guys have? And Amy, since you're on here, if you want to start.
Sure. And well, first of all, a lot of these companies are hiring, and they're looking for folks that if they don't have necessarily work experience, if they're graduating with degrees in sustainability or energy science or anything related to the field, there is real interest in growing and hiring in these startups. So you guys are very fortunate that you have a lot of these companies out west near you. And I think one of the key things is to just be willing, especially if you want to get into a startup, where it can be really great way to learn so much about the business, because you'll get exposure to so many different elements of the business beyond your job description. That talking with a lot of the investors in the area is a great way too to know which companies are hiring, or even signing up on some of the newsletters. Like there's a Climate Tech VC newsletter. They always list job openings. There is, I know by you guys, you have this great group that in Santa Cruz that is helping to identify jobs in the area, and they've got a really great incubator program. All of the incubators in the area are really good at also posting job boards. So totally think that these graduating students should be able to find their way, hopefully in this COVID time, which is such a hard time to be looking for a job, but there's a lot of great young companies that are hiring entry-level folks.
Nicole, I'm sure at Taylor Farms, the list of, I'm even going to make a lot of these young people here in Monterey studying happy with knowing what kind of career opportunities that you people have over there.
Yeah, Taylor Farms is great because we're a young and fast-growing company. I can't even tell you how many times over we've grown since I started with the company 12 years ago. So there's always really fun and exciting opportunities. I also want to highlight the fact that we have a great internship program, and this is something that we run every year. You can sign up through our website, and it allows you to really, once you're at the university level, it allows you to have some insight into the organization and explore different areas of the business and see which ones might be of most interest to you, and allows you to do some crossover training maybe into another area that you don't have as much experience in or are curious about, or would give you a little bit of background information in whatever your desired position might be. So I think that that's another really great opportunity that Taylor Farms offers for students.
And I would imagine in all areas, obviously, from production at Taylor Farms through logistics. I mean, I know that's a big push in Monterey, and even in the area of sustainability.
Absolutely.
That would be everything, right?
Yeah, I've done many internships over the years, and they're a ton of fun. I really love to bring folks in and just have them shadow me for the summer and attend the meetings that I'm in and let them see what it's really like to be director of sustainability for a large company like Taylor Farms, and the level of understanding that you need to have for the entire supply chain to do your job effectively. It's not just about understanding, the facility operations or the field operations. It's about understanding, the upstream management, work with our vendors and our growing operations, understanding packaging, food safety. You have to understand all of those different elements in order to do sustainability for a company like this, because they all play into each other every single day.
And Matt, what would you say the opportunities are for these young, bright men and women who are here watching us today?
Well, I think that there couldn't be a better time to get involved in agriculture. And, my own background is really in the startup world. I used to live actually not far from where you are in Santa Cruz, and I used to commute over the hill to go into the Silicon Valley. And I thought that the transition for me from academics into the corporate world through a startup was extremely beneficial, because you get to see so much more than you would see necessarily in a large company right away. On the other hand, I mean, you know, similar jobs are today offered in our company as well. I mean, if you go to Corteva Ag and you look at the job market there, there's certainly opportunities for internships, as Nicole talked about as well, but also for surveying the open positions. What's beautiful today is sort of the breadth of careers that you can have in agriculture. I mean, it combines data sciences, it combines chemistry, biology. There's so much you can do today. I would say keep an eye out, make up your mind whether you want to align with startups or with larger companies, and just go for it.
Thank you. You know, we have another question here. Now, this one is going to be a way above my pay grade here, so someone's going to have to help me out on the panel. So they're asking how receptive the ag industry is to carbon pricing. So any one of this esteemed panel would like to jump on that for me.
I'll take this one. Yeah, it's not something that we focus on today. You know, we are looking at trying to understand calculations for carbon sequestration in leafy greens. Something that there's a ton of research on for, you know, the larger agriculture commodities like corn and soy. And it's not something that there's been as much research done in specialty crops and in leafy greens. So that's something that we're starting to take a closer look at. But I wouldn't say that carbon pricing is something that has a heavy level of influence on our industry today.
Amy, have you seen anything with that happening in the investment world? And
you know what, there is definitely folks that have unique approaches for sharing and transacting the credits. I'm trying to think in terms of, like, other than in forestry, which I know there's a really exciting company in California called Patchma that was just funded by Breakthrough Energy Ventures and Amazon and Microsoft. And so they're creating a marketplace for large corporations to purchase carbon credits from forestry owners. And so I think that is an interesting area from a sequestration standpoint, and but also a carbon credit trading opportunity. I think that is very interesting, and there must be something similar in the ag space where the folks that are performing farming in low carbon ways could also get credit for that, and then potentially trade on those credits in the future. And California is probably one of the best markets right now to do that. So I'm not as familiar though with somebody that has a particular innovation in that area other than in the forestry space.
Matt, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's something that we're interested in measuring because, I mean, the modern ag practices and the practices that are right in front of us and that are starting to be adopted about cover crops and other rotations than the traditional corn soil rotations we were used to really participate in helping to sequester carbon. The challenge we have there is precise measurements still. So there are measurements of carbon sequestration, but the systems are not universal and not, I'd say, infinitely just applicable. So more improvements will be made in this space. And I think it's becoming something that receives a lot of focus, and will develop that space tremendously.
I wonder what everyone is seeing. I'm getting a little thing here telling me what we need to do here. Oh, got a good question here coming over. Are we seeing any different growing regions adapting? How are different growing regions adapting to technology? What would you see with that, Matt? Do you see differences, obviously, in different growing regions, microclimates, or different parts of the world, and how they're adapting with technology?
Yeah, I mean, climate is one part, but it is also technology adoption, which is different in different regions of the world. We're in an industry that's heavily regulated, and I'm sure everybody's heard about how, for example, Europe regulates differently than the US. So in the US, we tend to be avid adopters of technology, and that includes things like genome editing these days, which can also help adapting crops to climate change. In Europe, that's less the case. And so we do see differences. Latin America, for example, is also an adopter of technology. If we look at Asia, it depends. China has been relatively close to externally invented technology, but they're developing internal technology. This whole regulatory climate has, of course, a strong impact on how technology gets adopted. And I'm talking about genome editing, but it goes beyond that, crop protection, and it goes into new systems generally.
I'd love to comment on that as well. I'm in Chicago, and so we were participating with one of Plug and Play's agriculture incubators that they run out of the Midwest. And what was interesting, what we've known for the adoption of a lot of these technologies is that they really have to drive some kind of return on investment in a pretty short time window, like ideally a growing season. And if that's the case, then it's not so hard to convince farmers and other folks to use the technologies, but that's especially hard in the Midwest when your growing season is so short. So that's been part of the challenge, for folks that are growing grains and soybeans and other things, other crops in the Midwest. They really have a short season that's very tightly managed. And so to use some kind of technology, like it has to really prove that they can get some benefit out of it that year. Whereas for you guys out west, you have a much longer growing season. And so it's a little bit more forgiving in terms of trial and error and getting things to work there. And also that you have some more high margin crops. You're not under some of the same pricing pressure that the folks are that are working on real commodity crops here in the Midwest. So it's interesting to see those differences, even just in the United States.
To add to what Amy said, she's right that we do have a longer growing window, and you see that a lot in berries with a higher margin item. But we do face some of the same struggles, Amy, that you mentioned on having that return on investment in that growing season. And for agriculture commodities here, when you're looking at the leafy green items, we're looking at a 30-60 day growing cycle. And so trying to prove out something in that window is incredibly challenging. And we've got a lot of smart folks, in the ag tech sector that are working really hard on finding innovation to bring into our industry. But it is a challenge to, try and get, space on valuable ranches to try and test some of these products out when you do have that really short seasonality to things. And so it is a challenge, but, there's so much great work that's being done in this space. And it's, it feels like day by day we're seeing new innovations come to market that are really taking off.
One of the things that we're tracking is that, it's so hard to prove with these new technologies that they can improve the output by some small percentage points. But from a climate standpoint, if you can reduce waste, then that's almost as good as, improving the profitability or the production, right? And so we're looking at a lot of interesting companies that are trying to help reduce waste, either, at the field itself or in the logistic supply chain. So Full Harvest is a company that is trying to help reduce food waste for the crops that you guys grow out in the West there. We just talked to a company today called Gooder, which helps to take food waste and delivers it to hog farmers and other folks that can use it. And they actually can pass it through a nonprofit so folks get tax deductions on it. So it's a really interesting model. They're using kind of the part-time gig economy drivers to help transport this, and truck drivers to transport the food waste around. So sometimes it can be looking at just sort of, and those technologies I think are simpler. They're more on the logistical and supply chain front, so they don't take as much adoption from a, in season kind of like getting over that profitability hurdle. It's a little bit easier to give them a try, I think, with less kind of cost to the actual farmer.
I think we've got a question of someone wanting to ask how individually the three of you got to the career and what the path you took. Just curious how you kind of ended up where you ended up. Matt, you want to tell us how you started out and how it's all arrived?
Sure. So I mean, my funny accent doesn't come from the west side of Des Moines, right? I'm born and raised in Switzerland. Came to the US in the 90s, first to work at UC Santa Cruz, where I spent 6 years of my life really focusing on academic research. And like I said, I was a scientist. So, starting with plant physiology and biochemistry, molecular biology, moved to a startup company, became a bit of a jack of all trades, mixed biology with hardcore financials. And then when a company that we spun off got acquired by Pioneer Hybrid at the time, that was my transition to the big ag companies and focusing more on trying to marry basically business with my scientific background. That's what I've done.
Thank you. And so Nicole, how about yourself? How did you end up in this very important role that you have today?
Yeah, I attended Arizona State University and got my degree in recreation and tourism management, which was part of the School of Public Programs, which actually became the School of Sustainability at Arizona State the following year. So I was really on the introductory program to the sustainability school, which is now one of the best sustainability programs in the country, I think. And but honestly, Taylor Farms was one of my first jobs right out of college, and I frankly got lucky. And I started at administration, working in the front office, and the intent was for it to be a part-time job or a temporary job for me, while I found what I really wanted to do. And 12 years later, here we are, and just managed to continue to grow with the company. And Bruce Taylor, our CEO, he really allows employees to take risks and to challenge themselves. And so when we started working in sustainability, I just immediately raised my hand and said, hey, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I went to school for. This is what I want to do. Do you mind if I jump in here and try and see where we can take this? And he said, here you go. Let's see what you can do. Make us more sustainable. And so it's been a really fun adventure. And, I've learned a ton, on the job as we go, and learning on the fly, and I've had some really wonderful folks around me, and just watching this industry that gets a bad rap for not being as sustainable as some others, but there's really some phenomenal work being done on the farm and in the fields. On the farm and in the facilities, that's really leading the charge, and so it's been a great opportunity.
And Amy, how about yourself?
Sure. This is my fourth startup. So counting backwards, before starting Buoyant Ventures in January, I started another venture fund called Untitled Ventures here in Chicago to focus on digital energy investments. And before that, I started a technology accelerator called Clean Energy Trust. And it was designed to help start clean energy businesses in the Midwestern United States, to give them first checks, first amount of funding to get a new business off the ground. And a lot of those businesses came through labs and universities. And so we knew that there was a lot of great research here, but very little startup capital. So we created this accelerator called Clean Energy Trust to help serve 10, 12 states here in the Midwest and get companies started. And then earlier in my career, I was in California and started a tech company that we sold to Lego. It was a high-tech toy company. And I pivoted from sort of high-tech to energy and climate after I was sick. I was actually had cancer at a young age, and then had some time off to deal with that, and was really grateful that I was healed and cured of that. And the nature and the outdoors became so important to my healing process that after I had kids, shortly after I was healed of that and I had kids, I just decided I wanted to devote the rest of my career to trying to find climate solutions, because it meant so much to me. And I felt like I had to do whatever I could to make a difference while I was alive, to make things better for my kids and for their kids. So sometimes it becomes just a passion project. And I'm really actually encouraged and excited by all the young people that are graduating college and looking for jobs in the field. Like, it gives me a lot of hope. and there's some wonderful talent coming into the space. So I have no doubt that we can really address this with all these bright minds that are coming to the cause. But we've got to get going, and we've got to do it fast. As some of your prior panelists said, that we're really running out of time. Even if we implemented all these great ideas and technologies today, we'd still be warming. So we've got to get going and find these solutions and deploy them as fast as we can.
And real quickly, so in your university, and you went, and what were you studying when you were going to university? I'm just finance, I imagine, or?
Oh, I was actually a political science and psychology, so I was none of those. And so that just shows that, well, and when I was at Stanford at a time when they didn't have all these great programs, like folks are graduating now from Stanford with degrees in sustainability and, you know, impact investing and all these other categories, which would have been very appealing to me when I was there. But yeah, so I was, you know, it's never a straight road. It's always a winding road to kind of find your journey, and mine had lots of twists and turns, but I couldn't be more excited about what I'm doing now.
I think that's wonderful from all of you. I think that to point out to all the students that are watching us, you're exactly right. And now there are these, you know, sustainability, there's climate you can work on. I know CSUMB is working on the whole logistics, you know, which is fantastic. But no matter what you're studying in school, I think it's always just important to get out there, apply into these different businesses, because we've certainly hired people from wide spectrums. One of our best young ladies working for us went to school to be a school teacher, and she's running one of our entire divisions, right? Nothing to do with what she was doing in college. So interesting to do. I see we've got Dennis back, so I think how do we do on time, Dennis?
You have hit your mark, and you were as advertised, a who's who. And Amy, I want you to know I started my career in the Silicon Valley working for Atari, so I appreciate the transition from high-tech toys to produce. Makes perfect sense to me. Though it sounds like the one word we heard throughout all of the conversations was passion, followed closely by curiosity. So terrific job, thank you. It's my pleasure to bring up the founding dean of the College of Business at Cal State Monterey Bay, Dr. Sham Kamath, and all of us around him who have followed him for years know he likes to do no small things. So with that, Doctor, you're on.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for your introduction. What a terrific, informative, and impactful group of panels. Very, very thankful to all of you for your amazing presentations. I think our students have learned a lot. I want to emphasize that CSUMB is all about responsibility, responsible science, responsible business, responsible education, and we define a quintuple bottom line, that is people, planet, profit, but also ethics and equity. And you hit it all today with your comments. Forrest alluded to the work the College of Science is doing in the Salinas Valley. We are, the College of Science, my fellow dean will tell you, is developing programs and is launching programs that are going to really be one with the Webb Valley in terms of supplying the talent that's required for smart agriculture, climate smart agriculture. But in the College of Business, we are developing and we are launching, we already have the basis for an ag business supply chain management doing precisely the things Forrest alluded to: state-of-the-art demand forecasting, demand management, incentive market mechanisms and economics, integrated supply chain and risk management using big data to manage that. So just to inform our students that if you're passionate about these things, CSUMB is providing them. I wanted to thank, my job was to thank, so in a minute, let me thank all of those who have participated in today's panel. I'd especially like to thank the keynote speaker, Elizabeth Fastigi, and the panelists and the moderators. You've done a terrific job. I needn't mention all of you. I also want to thank the Grower Shipper Association Foundation for partnering with us for the 14th year in hosting this event. and promoting education regarding our agricultural sector and economy. My special thanks to Laurie Costa, the current president, who will be speaking after me, Dennis, for the past president, both of whom are well-known agribusiness folks in the community, as well as the incomparable Lisa Dobbins, the executive director and the board of directors of the GSAF, as well as CSU MB Professor Scott Fausti, who's also on the board. I also want to thank our team, Dean of Science Andrew Lawson, College of Business Chair Mary Lou Shockley, and the person behind us all, Cindy Satterley, our administrative staff coordinator. Special thanks to Lisa and Cindy and Susan Mangan and Marlena Rose from CSUMB's Marketing Communication Department for making all this work. And our partnership colleges, Hartnell College, Monterey Peninsula College, Cabrillo College, and Gavilan for the work that they have done to bring their students to this very informative event. President Ochoa and Provost of CSUMB for their regional development, or what we call steward of place focus, for keeping that and making us work with the development of the region. Most of all, I want to thank you students for being here today and listening to this amazing presentations that you heard. And we look forward to the career fair that's coming. So thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you all. And I'd like to now introduce my colleague, Dean Andrew Lawson of the College of Science. Dean Lawson.
Thank you, Dean Cometh, much appreciated. I'd also just like to reiterate your thanks, thanking all of today's panelists for really a very engaging and enlightening conversations. I'd also like to really extend my thanks both to the College of Business and Grower Shippers Foundation for being excellent partners in helping to organize today's events. So this fall actually marks a big time for us here in the College of Science. We launched our new degree in agricultural plant and soil science this fall. And this degree is really focused on the unique needs of our local agriculture industry. And we look forward to having an increasing impact on our local ag industry as we grow that program. As Dean Cometh alluded to, we're also looking forward to launching another new related program, a mechatronics engineering program with a heavy focus on ag tech in the coming years. So we can keep an eye out for that. Today's panelists really tied together a lot of different topics across climate science, irrigation, technology, energy, sustainability. It really demonstrates just the wide range of careers available in agriculture and related fields. And for those that are interested in sustainability and in providing healthy food for society, really have a lot of options and really interesting career paths ahead of them. So again, thank all of the students for participating today. And now I'd like to introduce Laurie Costa, President of Grower Shippers Association Foundation and CEO and Chair of Man Packing. Laurie.
Hi, thank you, Dean Lawson and Dean Cometh. On behalf of the Grower Shipper Association Foundation and our members, I just want to echo our thanks to the support staff, to the moderators and panelists who spent some time with us today. And most importantly, for all you students out there, it's been one heck of a year, but hopefully you got some inspiration and some career guidance from our content today. One of our important missions is to work with local educators on workforce development. So if you're ever sitting in a class or on a Zoom going, why am I studying this? Be assured that your professors, your deans have a direct line to the agriculture industry. I also sit on the CSUMB Business Advisory Council. And so it's a true partnership between our industry and your educators on what we feel you need to have a successful career, be it in agriculture or if it leads you somewhere else. But we need you. It's a dynamic, ever challenging